There are roughly 7,000 languages spoken on Earth today, and the people who navigate more than one of them aren't just bilingual. They're neurologically distinct from those who aren't, not in a vague motivational sense. In a measurable, documented cognitive sense, decades of neurolinguistic research have consistently found that managing multiple language systems reshapes the brain's architecture. How it stores information, how it reads people, how it handles pressure, and how it understands the world. Here are 7 ways that happens. 1. Your sense of self isn't fixed, it's adaptive. Ask a multilingual person if they feel like the same person in every language, and most will tell you no. This isn't a performance, it's a psychological reality. Every language carries embedded within it a set of cultural assumptions about directness, about emotional expression, about what's appropriate to say and how to say it. When you switch languages, you don't just switch vocabulary, you step into a different social framework. Psychologists studying this phenomenon have found that multilingual people score differently on personality assessments depending on which language they take them in. Confidence levels shift, humor changes register, emotional boundaries expand or contract. What looks like adaptability from the outside is actually something more precise, the ability to inhabit multiple cultural contexts authentically. Not by pretending, but by having genuinely internalized more than one way of being. 2. You rate people at a different resolution. When language fails, when you're in an environment where you can't fully rely on words, the brain compensates. It starts paying closer attention to everything else. Multilingual people, particularly those who've navigated environments where their dominant language wasn't spoken, develop a heightened sensitivity to nonverbal communication. Microexpressions, shifts in posture, the slight change in someone's voice when they're saying one thing and meaning another. This isn't intuition in the mystical sense, it's a trained perceptual skill. The brain learned out of necessity to extract social information from sources other than language. And that skill doesn't turn off when you return to a familiar linguistic environment. It becomes part of how you see people. 3. Your thinking isn't tied to one structure. Here's something most people never consider about language. It doesn't just express thought, it shapes it. Different languages partition reality differently. Some have words for emotional states that others lack entirely. Some structure causality differently. Some encode time and space in ways that subtly alter how speakers perceive sequence and distance. When you operate across multiple languages, your thinking becomes less dependent on any single linguistic structure. You start reaching for whichever framework best captures the idea, rather than forcing every idea through the same linguistic mold. Cognitive researchers refer to this as conceptual flexibility, and it has measurable effects on creativity, problem-solving range, and the ability to approach familiar problems from genuinely different angles. 4. Your emotional range is wider. This one surprises people. The language you use to express an emotion doesn't just describe the feeling, it shapes how fully you access it. Studies in affective psychology have found that people process emotional experiences differently depending on which language they engage with them in. A multilingual person who learned to express vulnerability in one language and professional composure in another has, in a sense, developed separate emotional registers, each calibrated to a different cultural context. This gives them something valuable: the ability to understand what someone is communicating emotionally, not just linguistically. They're not just translating words, they're translating the emotional logic underneath them, which requires a depth of empathic processing that monolingual communication rarely demands. 5. Your brain is better at managing cognitive load. Running 2 or more language systems simultaneously is genuinely demanding. The brain must constantly manage which language is active, suppress interference from the others, and switch between them fluidly when context requires it. This constant management, what neuroscientists call executive control, strengthens over time, and it transfers. Research consistently shows that multilingual people demonstrate stronger performance on tasks requiring sustained attention, mental flexibility, and resistance to distraction. Even tasks with no linguistic component at all, the mechanism being trained isn't language specific. It's the brain's general capacity to manage competing demands and maintain clarity under cognitive pressure. A lifetime of language management is functionally a lifetime of mental conditioning. 6. Your memory works in layers. Memory is not a single system, it's a collection of systems, each encoding experience differently depending on context, emotion, and the language in which the experience occurred. For multilingual people, this creates something researchers find genuinely fascinating. Memories formed in different languages carry different emotional textures. The same event, recalled in two different languages, can feel subtly different, not because the facts change, but because the emotional encoding does. This layered memory architecture produces richer autobiographical recall. It also means that certain memories are more fully accessed in one language than another, which has real implications for therapy, for self understanding, and for how multilingual people process their own life narratives. 7. You understand that reality is interpreted, not fixed. Perhaps the deepest cognitive shift that multilingualism produces is philosophical. When you've lived inside more than one language, you've experienced firsthand that the way a culture carves up the world, what it names, what it leaves unnamed, what it considers obvious versus what it treats as complex, is a choice, not a universal truth. This makes multilingual people structurally less susceptible to the assumption that their way of seeing things is simply the way things are. They felt from the inside that different frameworks produce genuinely different perceptions. The practical result is greater intellectual humility, more genuine openness to perspectives that differ from their own, and a harder to manipulate worldview because they've already lived proof that any single narrative is only ever partial. Speaking more than one language is often framed as a skill, something useful for travel, for work, for connection. But what the research actually shows is something more fundamental. It's a different way of being in the world, a different relationship to identity, to other people, to thought itself. If you move between languages, even imperfectly, even haltingly, your brain is doing something most peoples never have to. And that's worth understanding.